Hey guys, tonight you find yourself outside a walled town at dusk, with cold stone rising ahead of you, damp straw clinging to the cuffs of your boots, smoke gathering under the darkening rafters of the gatehouse, and distant bells trembling through the river mist. Your cloak smells faintly of wet wool, and horse breath hangs pale in the winter air, while torchlight shivers along the mud as if even the flames are considering going indoors. Medieval travel brochures really oversold this experience, assuming they existed, and assuming anyone could read them without first selling a goat. You probably would not last a week out here. Not because you lack spirit, but because spirit does not keep your socks dry. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you settle in, comment where you're watching from and what the local time is where you are. Because somewhere in this wide, sleepy world, another bell is marking another hour. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand before the town gate as evening folds itself over the road. The last cart of the day creaks ahead of you, its wheels complaining in the ruts, its load covered by a stiff hide darkened with rain. A boy in a patched cap walks beside the ox, tapping its flank with a willow switch, though the animal has the calm expression of a creature that has already decided it will arrive whenever it arrives, above you, on the wall walk. A guard in a fur-lined cloak leans on his spear and watches the road with the bored suspicion of a man who has seen too many turnips and not enough miracles. The gate itself is oak, blackened around the iron straps, and it smells of old rain, old hands, and old fear. You pass beneath it with your shoulders slightly hunched, as if the stones might remember every traveller who ever ducked through. Rushes and mud are trampled together underfoot. Somewhere nearby, a dog barks once, then decides that is quite enough civic duty for one evening. Inside the walls, the town is not bright, not yet. It glimmers in pieces, a lamp in a shuttered window, a torch outside a tavern, a thin line of fire beneath a door. You hear the slow drip of water from tiled roofs, the hollow cluck of hens being shut into a yard, the mutter of women drawing in laundry before the damp ruins it further. There is pottage simmering somewhere, thick with peas and onion, and smoked fish hanging in a stall under rough cloth. The smell of it mixes with dung, wet leather, wood smoke, and the sour, sweet breath of ale. But beneath it all, faint and steady, you catch another scent, honeyed, warm, a little grassy, a little like summer trapped in a dark room, beeswax. You follow it. The lane narrows as you leave the busier street. Here the houses lean close, their upper stories jutting over the way as though gossiping across the mud. Little gutters run beside your boots. A woman tosses old rushes from a doorway, sweeping them into the lane with a birch broom. In a better house, those rushes might be strewn fresh across stone floors and mixed with herbs. Lavender if the household is proud. Tansy if they are practical. And sometimes sweet woodruff if someone wants the place to smell less like 12 people. 2 dogs and a winter. No one can quite agree whether such herbs truly keep sickness away, though nearly everyone agrees they make sickness smell more polite. You turn beside a baker's wall still holding the day's warmth and come upon a low workshop pressed between a cooper's shed and a narrow house with blue-painted shutters. Above the door hangs a small wooden sign, dark with weather, carved with a candle and a little flame. The flame has been gilded once, perhaps years ago, and now only a few stubborn flecks remain, catching the torchlight like tired stars. The door is open just enough for light to spill out. You step closer. Within, The room is dim in a way that feels alive, not empty darkness, but working darkness. Soot has climbed the rafters and settled there like black wool. Bundles of wicks hang from pegs. Clay jars sit along a shelf. A long dipping rack stretches across the room, with rows of pale, thin candles suspended like sleeping icicles. Near the hearth, a great pot rests over coals, and beside it stands the candlemaker, sleeves rolled, face lined by heat and patience. He looks up but does not hurry. Medieval craftspeople rarely hurry unless something is burning, collapsing, or demanding payment. "You are late," he says, though not unkindly. You're not sure late for what, exactly. But in the Middle Ages this seems to be a condition one can enter simply by existing after sunset. He gestures you inside, and you duck beneath the lintel. The warmth meets you slowly. Your fingers ache as they thaw. Your boots leave dark prints on the packed earth floor. Near the hearth lies a small brown dog, narrow-snouted and watchful, who opens one eye and seems to decide you're either harmless or not worth the paperwork. The candlemaker's name is Martin, though the widow next door calls him Master Martin when she wants a fair price, and Martin, only Martin when she does not. His apron is stiff with old wax. A linen cap sits crooked on his head. Around his neck hangs a little charm, a pierced coin, a twist of thread, and what may be a tiny scrap of parchment folded and sealed. Some swear such charms guard a household against fire. Others say they're mostly useful for making neighbours ask questions. Even now, it is hard to tell whether Martin believes in the charm or simply believes in not taking chances around boiling fat and open flame. He points to a stool near the wall, and you sit. The wood is hard, polished by years of tired bodies. On the table before you are coils of wick, a knife with a bone handle, and a shallow bowl of clipped candle ends. Nothing is wasted here. A stub from a chapel, a broken taper from a manor hall. The last heel of a household candle, all of it may be melted, strained, blended, and born again into another small light. Outside, the town bell sounds from the church tower, not loud, not clean, but deep and worn, as though the bell has been awake longer than everyone else and resents it slightly. The sound rolls through the lane, past shuttered windows and dripping eaves, and the workshop seems to pause around it. Martin crosses himself with 2 fingers. You do the same, a half-beat late, hoping no one is grading your technique. Vespers, he murmurs. The word settles softly. Evening prayer, the hour when work bends toward night, when monks chant behind stone walls, when market stalls close, when children are called in, when travellers hurry toward shelter, and when candle makers become more important than kings for anyone who would like to see their own supper. He lifts a finished taper and turns it between his fingers. It is smooth, pale, faintly golden. Beeswax. You realize, not the smoky, greasy tallow that most households burn when they can afford any candle at all, but finer stuff, cleaner, sweeter, dearer. The kind used in churches, wealthy houses, and places where people prefer their prayers not to smell like mutton. You lean closer. The taper carries the scent you followed through the lane, soft as summer combs and meadow clover. It seems strange that such a smell belongs here, in this cramped workshop with soot-black rafters, damp walls, and a dog that may or may not be judging your boots. Martin lays the candle among others in a wooden tray. Abbey wax, he says. Good enough for saints, if saints are not too particular. That is the first thing you learn in this world. Light has ranks, a rushlight for the poor, tallow for the ordinary, beeswax for the altar, the hall, the sickbed of someone important, the chamber where a clerk scratches ink across parchment late into the night. Light is not merely light, it is cost, smell, status, devotion, and occasionally an argument with a toll collector. You hear wheels outside, then voices. A woman laughs under her breath. Someone curses at a mule with the restraint of a person aware the parish priest might be nearby. The dog rises, stretches luxuriously, and trots to the door. You follow him with your eyes. In the lane beyond, the last dusk has deepened. Smoke drifts low. A torch burns near the corner, its flame bending in the damp wind. Farther away, above the roofs, you can see the church tower, and beyond it, if the mist shifts, the faint line of the Abbey Road. Martin notices your gaze. "Tomorrow," he says, as if continuing a conversation you've not yet earned. "You go with me for wax." You look back at him. He smiles faintly, best to see where the light begins. Then he turns to the hearth, stirs the coals, and the workshop breathes warmer. You sit with cold knees, thawing hands, and the smell of beeswax wrapped around you. Outside, the gate is closing for the night. Iron bolts slide home. The town gathers itself inward. And here, in this dim room, among wicks, smoke, and old charms against fire, your long life as a medieval candlemaker begins not with brightness, but with the patient promise of it. The workshop wakes before the town does, though it never quite seems to sleep. Even in the deepest part of the night, when the gate is barred and the last drunk has surrendered to a bench somewhere under a tavern table, the room keeps a memory of heat. Coals breathe under grey ash. Wax hardens in shallow pans. Wicks hang in patient rows. The rafters hold smoke the way old men hold grudges, quietly and for years. You wake on a narrow pallet near the wall, beneath a wool blanket that smells of lanolin, old straw, and someone else's practical expectations. The brown dog is curled against your feet. Not because he loves you, you suspect, but because your toes are the warmest objects he could legally occupy. Outside, rain ticks softly along the shutters. Somewhere beyond the lane, a cock crows too early, then another answers as if correcting him. No one can quite agree whether cocks truly know the hour or merely enjoy making everyone else nervous. Martin is already standing at the hearth. He does not announce morning. He simply exists in it, bending over the coals with a taper in one hand and a strip of dry kindling in the other. The first flame comes small and blue, then yellow. It catches, licks upward, and shows the room piece by piece the long dipping frame, the hooks, the bundles of linen thread, the clay jar of salt, the beeswax cakes wrapped in cloth, the darker lumps of tallow waiting in a covered pot. "Up," he says softly. You sit, blinking. In a wealthy chamber, someone might wake to a servant drawing curtains and offering warmed wine. Here, you wake to smoke in your nose and a candlemaker who believes comfort is what happens after work is finished. If the saints approve the schedule, you pull on your boots. They are still damp. They may have been born damp. Medieval boots, you're beginning to understand, are less footwear than a long argument with weather. Martin gives you a crust of coarse bread and a wooden cup of thin ale. Breakfast is not grand, but it is honest. The bread is dense enough to settle any wandering thoughts, and the ale is safer than much of the water, which is a fact people mention with pride right up until they taste it. You chew beside the hearth while Martin lifts the lid from the pot. A heavy smell rises. Tallow. It is not the honeyed softness of the beeswax taper from last night. It is earthier, fattier, stubbornly animal, like a butcher's stall remembering summer too vividly. You try not to make a face. The dog makes one for you. Martin notices and gives the faintest smile. "Town candles," he says. Most folk buy what they can. He hands you a wooden paddle. The handle is smooth from long use, darkened by grease and smoke. You take your place beside the pot and stir slowly as the fat warms. It softens in clumps, then loosens, then becomes a shining pool beneath the trembling skin. Martin adds a pinch of salt, then a handful of something dried and green. "Rosemary," you ask. Sometimes bay. Sometimes whatever the herb wife says will sweeten a room and frighten bad air. Some swear rosemary smoke helps keep sickness from the threshold. Others tuck sprigs above doors, under pillows, or into shrouds. Even now, it is hard to tell whether the herb protects the living, honours the dead, or simply improves the smell of things people are too polite to name before breakfast. The first work is slow and ordinary. Martin shows you how to skim the top of the melted tallow with a flat spoon, lifting away scraps and cloudy bits that would make a candle gutter. Nothing about it feels magical. It is warm fat, careful hands, and patience. Yet the room gathers around the task as if it matters, because it does. Without this, a family eats supper in darkness. A midwife works by ember glow. A monk loses his place in the psalter. A guard on the wall mistakes a bush for a raider and spends all night feeling heroic about shrubbery. On the table, Martin lays out wicks. Some are linen, twisted fine, some are hemp, coarser and rougher, for poorer lights. Rushes may be peeled and soaked in grease, leaving one strip of green skin to hold the pith together. Rushlights burn quickly, but they are cheap, and in a cottage where every coin has already been promised to bread, rent, toll, tithe, and possibly a pig with medical opinions. Cheap is a kind of grace. You lift a wick between your fingers. It feels fragile, almost nothing. Martin sees the doubt on your face. "Flame needs a road," he says. So you learn that a candle is not just wax, it is a road for fire. The wick drinks the melted fuel upward, and the flame feeds where air, thread, and fat meet. Too thick a wick, and the candle smokes. Too thin, and it drowns in its own melting. Poor twisting makes a crooked burn. Bad drying makes a sulking flame. The candle-maker's craft is full of tiny failures that announce themselves only after someone has paid for them. He shows you the dipping rack, a simple frame from which pairs of wicks hang over a trough. Each wick is looped over a rod, both ends dangling. Martin lowers them into the warm tallow, lifts them, lets them drip, and hangs them to cool. At first, nothing seems to happen. The wicks look only wet. Then, as the air touches them, a thin pale coat clings to the thread. Again, down into the tallow, up into the air, drip, wait, again. The rhythm enters your shoulders. The workshop grows quiet except for the soft tap of drops falling back into the trough, the rain at the shutters, the dog turning once in a circle before lying down as if supervising has exhausted him. You begin to understand the hours hidden inside a candle. Each slender stick of light is made by returning to the same motion many times, never too quickly. If the fat is too hot, the layers melt away. If it is too cool, they lump and wrinkle. Martin tests the surface with a glance, a finger held near. A craftsman's instinct formed over years of burns, bad batches, and customers who think a candle should be both perfect and suspiciously cheap. By mid-morning the town stirs around you. Hooves slap mud. A woman calls for her daughter. The cooper next door hammers iron hoops round a barrel, each strike ringing through the wall. From the church comes another bell, and Martin pauses just long enough to cross himself. You copy him more smoothly this time. Those who tell the tale never fully agree on how candle makers first learned the best mixtures, whether from monks, from old Roman methods, from household women making do in winter, or from generations of burned thumbs. Martin only shrugs when you ask. Fire teaches, he says, usually by being rude. That is the second joke of the morning, and in this workshop it passes for sparkling conversation. He lets you trim yesterday's finished candles with the bone-handled knife. You cut the bottoms even, scrape away uneven bulges, and save the shavings in a bowl. The trimmings curl like pale cheese beside you. Martin sorts candles by quality, straight ones for better buyers, crooked ones for kitchens, smoky ones for people who ask too many questions about price. A neighbour arrives near noon, ducking through the doorway with a basket over one arm and rain beads in her grey hair. She is the widow from next door, and she brings 2 cracked candle stubs, 3 eggs, and news that a pilgrim has lost a badge near the market cross. Martin weighs the stubs in his palm as seriously as a merchant weighs silver. Enough for a night's light, he says. Enough for half a night if your wicks behave, she replies. He gives her 2 small tallow candles in exchange. She sniffs them, narrows her eyes, and says they smell better than the last batch. Martin bows slightly. Then the saints are improving. When she leaves, the dog follows her to the threshold, perhaps hoping one of the eggs will suffer an accident. The afternoon dims early, as winter afternoons do, folding down from the rooftops before anyone has finished being useful. You stand by the dipping rack, hands sore, sleeves smelling of fat and smoke. Rows of candles hang before you now, thicker than they were at dawn, each one built layer by layer from repetition. They are not beautiful in the way the beeswax taper was beautiful, but they are serviceable, humble, necessary. They belong to kitchens, sick rooms, lofts, guard posts, and small tables where someone counts coins with cold fingers. Martin lifts one and turns it. Not bad, he says. It is difficult to tell whether he means the candle, your work, or the day itself, but you accept the praise before it changes its mind. Evening creeps close again. The workshop smells of warm tallow, damp wool, rosemary, smoke, and the faint golden sweetness of wrapped beeswax waiting for tomorrow's journey. You help sweep the floor, gathering scraps of wick, ash, and old rushes. Martin banks the hearth. The brown dog settles beside the pallet as if you are now part of the furniture. Outside, the church bell sounds through the wet lane, softer than last night, blurred by rain. You look at the hanging candles and feel the small wonder of them. All this labour for a flame no taller than your thumb. All this patience so someone, somewhere, may push back the dark long enough to mend a sleeve, whisper a prayer, stir a pot, or find the bed without stepping on the cat. In the dim workshop that feels like enough. By the time the rain thins to mist, the workshop has settled into that grey hour when morning is no longer new, yet the day has not quite decided what sort of trouble it intends to become. Martin wraps the best beeswax taper from the shelf in linen, tucks a folded list beneath his belt, and hands you a hooded cloak that smells faintly of smoke, sheep, and weather that won every argument. You carry the basket, he says. The basket is heavier than it looks, because medieval baskets are like medieval promises woven plainly, but somehow full of labour. Inside are old candle stubs from chapel use, bits of clipped wick, 2 small tallow candles for trade, and a piece of coarse bread wrapped in cloth. The brown dog watches this arrangement with deep interest, especially the bread. then rises and follows you both into the lane as if hired for protection. His size suggests he could perhaps defend you from an unusually timid goose. You leave the workshop by the narrow back way, where gutters trickle beside the walls and the houses lean so close above that the sky becomes a pale ribbon. A woman scatters fresh rushes through her doorway, shaking herbs into them from a pouch. She tells Martin that Rue keeps envy from the threshold. Martin nods solemnly. No one can quite agree whether Rue truly keeps envy away, but it has a bitter smell, and perhaps envy, like most people, prefers a sweeter room. The town is waking in damp layers. A baker pulls blackened loaves from an oven mouth with a long peel. A boy drags a sack of charcoal over the stones. A clerk with ink-stained fingers hurries past, clutching wax tablets under his cloak, looking like a man who has already been corrected by someone richer than himself. At the market cross, a pilgrim in a patched hat bends near the mud, searching for the lost badge the widow mentioned yesterday. It is a tiny thing, stamped with the image of a saint, and he pats the ground with such care that you slow to watch. "Bad luck to lose one before the shrine road," Martin murmurs. It depends who sells replacements. That is Martin's way of saying the world is complicated, and also that someone near the church porch is probably making a profit from holy anxiety. You pass beneath the inner arch and out through the town gate. The guard from the first evening stands there again, wrapped in his fur-lined cloak, his beard beaded with mist. He lifts 2 fingers to Martin, then looks at you as though wondering whether you are taxable. Beyond the gate, the road lowers toward the river, then rises toward the abbey fields. Mud clings to your boots with a personal devotion. Crows step through the furrows, black and deliberate, like little monks who took the wrong vows. The abbey appears slowly, not all at once. First the bell tower beyond the mist, then the long roof of the church, then walls of pale stone, damp with winter, and the darker shapes of barns, sheds, and the guest house huddled near the outer court. The bell sounds as you approach, deep and measured, calling the brothers from one duty to another. Time here is not counted by clocks on mantelpieces, for there are no such cosy conveniences for you. Time is wrung out in metal, sung in psalms, scratched into wax tablets, and felt in your knees when the road climbs. At the abbey gate, a lay brother opens a small wicket and peers out. His nose is red from cold, his hands hidden in his sleeves. He knows Martin and lets you in with the faint sigh of a man admitting damp weather in human form. Inside, the air changes. It is still cold, but ordered. The yard smells of wet stone, stable straw, brewing ale, and cabbage from the kitchen. Hens scratch near a wall. A novice crosses the court carrying a bundle of rushes for the refectory floor, and behind him another carries a tray of little lamps, each one dark for now, somewhere unseen. Monks chant in a low stream of Latin that moves under the day like water under ice. You follow Martin toward a range of workshops near the abbey stores. The brown dog trots at your heels until a stern cook appears in a doorway with a ladle, and then he wisely pretends he was only visiting the hens. The wax is kept in a locked chamber, because beeswax is precious. It comes from hives tended in abbey gardens, from rents paid by villagers, from gifts offered in memory of the dead, from old altar candles melted down after feast days. Some of it has travelled from estates miles away, wrapped in cloth, marked with seals, and counted by men who trust God deeply, but still prefer iron keys. A cellarer meets you at the door. He's round-faced, pale-eyed, and calm in the manner of a man who knows exactly how many barrels of ale remain until Lent. At his belt hangs a ring of keys large enough to make a small argument with gravity. He greets Martin, examines the folded list, and unlocks the store. The smell inside is beautiful. Not bright, exactly, deep, golden, dry. Beeswax lies stacked in cakes and lumps, some smooth, some rough with a print of comb, some pale yellow, some darker, carrying the scent of summer fields, hive smoke, pollen, and distant blossoms the winter has not yet managed to erase. You breathe it in and feel, for a moment, the workshop's soot and tallow lift from your senses. The cellarer notices. Good wax, he says, for Candlemas stores, altar tapers, and 2 funeral lights promised by the manor. Candlemas, the feast when candles are blessed in winter, when people bring their household lights to church and carry them home with hope tucked into the flame. Some swear a blessed candle can calm thunder, ease a difficult birth, or keep wolves from the door. Even now, it is hard to tell whether the candle protects the house, or whether the hand holding it simply feels less alone. Martin chooses the wax carefully, pressing each cake, shaving a little with his knife, smelling it, weighing it in his palm. Too much old tallow mixed in, and the abbey will hear about it from someone with a very long memory. Too much dirt or honey left within, and the candle may spit. Good beeswax burns cleaner than tallow, with a steadier flame and a sweeter scent, which is why churches love it. A prayer rising through mutton smoke may still reach heaven, of course, but the monks prefer not to test the root. While Martin bargains, you look toward the inner court. Through an open doorway, you glimpse a scribe bent over a desk, his fingers dark with ink, a candle burning beside him, though the day is not yet gone. The flame trembles each time he breathes. Near his elbow lies a small knife for scraping errors from parchment. You imagine the candle shortening through the hours as letters grow across the page, one little light spending itself so words may remain. The cellarer gives Martin a bundle of old altar candle ends as part of the exchange. Each stub is thick, pale, and marked by use. One has a stripe of red wax near the base. Another smells faintly of incense. The cellarer lowers his voice and says one came from beside a reliquary containing a finger bone of St. Aldhelm, or possibly St. Anselm, depending which brother is telling the story and how much ale he has had. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether the relic is genuine. Martin only wraps the candle stub with care, genuine or not. Wax is wax, and saintly wax sells better. Before leaving, you pause in the abbey church. The space is dim, high, and cold, with stone pillars rising like grey trees. Little flames burn before side altars. Their light touches painted saints with calm, long faces and gilded halos that glow even in the gloom. You stand very still. The world outside is mud, tolls, wet wool, and hard bread. Here, for a moment, even the cold seems to whisper. Martin does not hurry you. Perhaps he knows that candlemakers spend their lives making light for other people's prayers, and only rarely stand inside the prayer itself. At last the bell sounds again, and the spell loosens. You return through the yard with the wrapped beeswax in your basket, heavier now, sweeter now, precious enough that you keep one hand over it as you walk. The brown dog rejoins you near the gate with the proud expression of a creature who has survived a major diplomatic incident with poultry. The road back to town lies under a clearing sky. Mist lifts from the fields. Your boots sink and pull free, sink and pull free. Behind you, the abbey bell fades. Ahead, smoke rises from the town, and somewhere within its walls waits the dim workshop, the dipping rack, the tallow pot, and the slow labour of turning summer's honeyed memory into winter flame. The beeswax rests in the workshop like a small treasure, wrapped in linen on the highest shelf, safely away from damp dog noses and anyone who thinks all yellow lumps are roughly the same. Martin checks it twice before nightfall, not because it has moved, but because precious things in a medieval town have a way of becoming stories if left unattended. By the time the shutters are barred and the hearth is banked, the sweet scent of abbey wax still lingers beneath the darker smell of smoke and tallow, as if summer and slaughterhouse have agreed to share a room politely. You sleep lightly, or what passes for sleep when rain ticks against wood and the brown dog dreams against your ankles. Before dawn, Martin wakes you with a touch on the shoulder. No bell has rung yet. The world outside is still black-blue and secretive. "Yard," he says. That is all. Medieval mornings do not come with explanations. They come with chores. You pull on cold boots and follow him through the back door into the narrow yard behind the workshop. Frost has silvered the edges of the water trough. The air bites your cheeks. Somewhere far off, a cock considers crowing and thinks better of it. Above the roofs, a few stars remain, pale and stubborn, watching the town like tired clerks. In the yard stands a covered tub, a chopping block, 2 iron pots, and a heap of wrapped fat brought from the butcher after yesterday's killing. This is the other beginning of the light. Not honeyed comb, not abbey chant, not golden cakes guarded by keys, but pale lumps of sweet and scraps of animal fat, firm with cold and faintly sour under the cloth. You try to breathe through your mouth. Martin notices, because Martin notices everything that might become laziness. Good tallow starts ugly, he says. Some swear the cleanest candles come from sheep fat. Others prefer beef suet, and no one can quite agree whether goat fat is a useful material or a punishment invented for poor households. What everyone agrees is that badly rendered tallow smokes stinks, sputters, and makes a room feel as though the butcher has come indoors and refused to leave. You help Martin cut the fat into pieces. The knife is heavy, the block scarred by years of work. Your fingers stiffen in the cold, and the fat resists in waxy chunks. Martin works steadily, neither fast nor slow, dropping pieces into the iron pot. He adds water first, then fat, then sets the pot over a low outdoor fire built in a sheltered corner, where smoke crawls along the wall before rising. The trick, he tells you, is not to scorch it. Scorched tallow remembers. It remembers in the candle, in the flame, in the walls, and in the expression of every customer who comes back to complain. So the fire must be gentle, the fat must melt slowly, bits of flesh and sinew must be strained away. Salt may help, herbs may soften the smell. Patience, as usual, does most of the work and receives the least praise. The first monastery bell sounds from far across the dark, faint but clear, matins, perhaps, or some hour close to it. The monks are awake behind their walls, chanting while you stand in a yard stirring fat before sunrise. It is difficult to say who has chosen the harder path. The monks have cold stone, strict rules, and no wives. You have a steaming pot that smells like a sheep's final opinion. As the tallow melts, Martin brings out an old linen cloth stretched over a wooden frame. You hold it while he ladles the hot liquid through. Cloudy golden fat runs down into a clean vessel, leaving scraps behind. Steam rises into the cold air. Your eyes water. The dog sits at a careful distance, deeply torn between disgust and ambition. Do people truly buy much of this, you ask? More than wax. Martin says, wax is for altars, halls, rich bedsides, and those who wish to impress God or their neighbours. tallow is for everybody who still wants to find the spoon after sunset. That is the plain truth of it. Most houses cannot afford beeswax candles except perhaps for holy days, childbirth, deathbeds, or a wedding where someone wants the bride's family to notice. Tallow candles are cheaper, softer, smellier, and far more common. They may bend in warm weather. Mice may nibble them if left unwatched. Dogs may develop theological interest in them, but they burn, and burning is what matters when night presses against the shutters. Martin shows you a row of old moulds hanging under the eaves. Some candle makers pour tallow into metal or wooden moulds, though many still dip by hand. Moulds give shape quickly, but they are costly and fussy. Dipping takes time, yet time is the one thing poor craftspeople are expected to spend freely, since no one pays much for it. The sky lightens by a shade. Not dawn yet, only the idea of dawn. A cart rattles beyond the lane. Someone coughs behind a wall, in a nearby house. A baby begins to cry, then quiets after a woman murmurs words too soft to catch. Martin tosses dried bay into the fire and sparks lift. Against bad air, you ask. Against the smell, he says. Then, after a moment, and bad air. In this town, sickness is often blamed on foul vapours, damp bedding, unbalanced humours, unlucky stars, spoiled food, God's displeasure, or the old woman 3 doors down who owns too many cats. Even now, it is hard to tell whether anyone is entirely wrong. The remedies are just as varied. Rosemary hung above the bed, vinegar cloths held to the nose, charms sewn into sleeves, leeches in a jar, prayers to the proper saint, and, when all else fails, blaming the weather with confidence. The rendered tallow cools in shallow pans until it grows cloudy and pale. Martin presses a finger to the surface. Testing. Your hands ache. Your cloak smells permanently altered. The first true light appears over the roofs, thin and grey, and the frost begins to soften into beads of water along the trough. A butcher's boy arrives with another small parcel, late and apologetic. He has mud to his knees and a bruise on his cheek from slipping near the market ditch. Martin pays him in clipped candle ends and one small rushlight for his mother. The boy grins as if given a jewel. You watch him tuck it into his cap and hurry away, and you remember that even a poor light can be a treasure when a house has none. By the time the church bell rings prime, the town has begun to stir fully. Smoke rises from many roofs, doors open, pails clatter. The suspicious guard passes the end of the lane with a spear over one shoulder, pretending not to be cold. Martin carries the clean tallow inside, and you follow with the empty frame, careful not to drip grease on the threshold. The workshop welcomes you with its familiar dimness soot-black rafters, hanging wicks, clipped stubs, and the wrapped beeswax waiting above like a quieter, nobler cousin. You set the tallow near the hearth. It is plain, pale, humble material, born from a cold yard before dawn. Soon it will become candles for kitchens, lofts, guardrooms, alehouses, sick-beds, and small tables where someone's tired hands mend linen by a wavering flame. It will not smell like flowers. It will not glow before painted saints unless fortune carries it there by mistake. But it will stand between ordinary people and the dark. Martin wipes his knife, looks toward the shelf of abbey wax, then back at the fresh tallow. Both make light, he says. And as the day gathers itself around the workshop, you understand that this is the heart of the craft golden wax for heaven, pale tallow for earth. And between them, your cold hands learning how to coax a little brightness from whatever the world provides. By the time the fresh tallow is cooled enough to handle, The workshop has filled with a pale, fatty quiet. The rain has stopped, but the lane outside still whispers with runoff, and now and then a drop falls from the eaves with the solemn importance of a church bell. Martin opens the shutters a thumb's width, letting in a stripe of grey daylight and a thin breath of air that moves through the room, over the hanging candles, across the wrapped beeswax, and into the soot-black rafters where yesterday's smoke still keeps its own counsel. Today, he sets no pot over the fire at first. Instead, he clears the work table. This, you learn, is a dangerous sign. A cleared table means small work, and small work means the sort of patience that slips under your fingernails and settles between your shoulders. Martin lays out linen thread, hemp fibre, peeled rushes, a little bowl of melted grease, a knife, a spindle, and a row of narrow wooden pegs. Beside them, he places a charm tied with red thread and a tiny sprig of dried vervain. The dog sniffs it once, sneezes, and withdraws his endorsement. "Wicks," Martin says. You sit opposite him, hands folded as if awaiting judgment. In truth, the wick looks too simple to matter. A bit of thread, a twist of plant, a pale, soft thing that might vanish if dropped among the rushes on the floor. But Martin taps one finger on the table. Bad wick, bad candle. So the lesson begins. You take linen strands and roll them against your thigh, twisting them together until they hold, not too tight, or the flame starves, not too loose, or the candle burns as if trying to embarrass its maker. Martin shows you how to double the thread, how to smooth it with a little grease, how to hang it from a peg so it dries straight. You try once, and the result looks like something pulled from a bird's nest after a storm. Martin considers it. For kitchen use, he says. That, you discover, is his kindest insult. He twists his own wick with a calm so complete it seems unfair. His fingers move slowly, but the strands obey. Linen for better candles, hemp for common ones, rush pith for the poorest light. In cottages beyond the town wall, people cut rushes from wet ground in summer, peel away most of the green skin, and soak the soft white core in grease. A rushlight may burn only briefly, but it is enough to find a cup, mend a tear, or stare at the wall while wondering why taxes have once again become everyone's hobby. You lift one of the rushes. It is light, almost hollow. Martin takes a knife and shows you how to peel it, leaving one narrow strip of outer skin intact to hold the pith together. Your first attempt breaks, your second curls, your third looks acceptable from one side and tragic from the other. The dog watches from the hearth with the grave expression of a master craftsman who has never paid rent. Outside, a woman calls to another across the lane. Somewhere a cartwheel splashes through mud. The cooper's hammer begins again next door, steady and ringing. Each strike shakes a little soot from the rafters, and you start to suspect the whole town is held together by repetition hammer, bell, broom, prayer, churn, treadle, knife, dip, twist. Martin hands you a bundle of finished rushlights from a peg near the door. They are slender, uneven, and humble, with grease dried along their pale sides. Widow Agnes takes these, he says. She burns one while she spins. Do they smoke? Everything smokes if treated poorly. This seems less like a candle-making answer and more like a philosophy of mankind. So you nod. As the morning deepens, a young apprentice from the saddler arrives with a broken strap. Not because Martin repairs leather, but because the boy's master sent him to borrow a flame and perhaps a little gossip. He leaves with a lit taper protected inside a pierced horn lantern. The horn is scraped thin until light passes through it. cloudy and yellow, safer than carrying naked flame in the wind. Some swear horn lanterns keep away wandering spirits because spirits dislike looking at themselves in cloudy surfaces. No one can quite agree whether spirits are so easily discouraged, but the lantern is very good at keeping sparks out of hay, which may be the more reliable miracle. After he leaves, Martin takes the charm from the table. It is small red thread, folded parchment, vervain, and a blackened pin. He hangs it from a nail beside the hearth. Against sudden flame, he says. You glance at the fire, then at the rows of wicks, grease, tallow, wax, rushes, wood, cloth, and one sleeping dog, all gathered in a single room. A useful charm, you say, if it works, and if it does not, then we blame the person who tied it. There is another charm tucked into the window frame, made from rowan wood and a scrap of blue cloth. A horseshoe hangs above the back door, though it is cracked, and Martin refuses to throw it away. Some swear iron turns aside ill luck, witchcraft, and troublesome fairies. Others say iron mostly turns aside the bare foot of anyone careless enough to step on it. Even now, it is hard to tell whether the old protections guard the workshop, or whether they simply remind everyone to be careful. Martin shows you how wicks are matched to candles. Thin wicks for slender tapers, thicker wicks for squat household candles. A candle meant for a lantern must not burn too fiercely, or it will soften itself into ruin. A chapel taper must be even and dignified, not coughing smoke before a saint's painted face like a guilty schoolboy. A cheap tallow candle may be more forgiving, because its buyer expects disappointment and is pleasantly surprised by basic competence. You spend a long while sorting linen here, hemp there, rushes tied by length, failed twists set aside for melting scraps or kitchen use. Your fingertips grow rough, little fibres cling to your sleeves, a strand of hemp sticks to your lip, and you remove it with as much dignity as possible, which is to say, not much. Near midday, the bells sound again, and Martin allows a pause. You eat bread, cheese, and a spoonful of onion pottage from a shared bowl. The pottage is thick and warming, and if it lacks elegance, elegance is not what your stomach has requested. Martin drops a crust for the dog, who accepts it as though concluding a treaty. A pilgrim passes the doorway while you eat, his cloak patched, his hat decorated with two little badges. One shows a shell, the other, newly bought perhaps, glints with the saint's image. He asks for a candle small enough to carry, blessed if possible, cheap if not. Martin tells him blessings must be acquired from the church, while cheapness is available immediately. The pilgrim laughs softly and buys a small tallow candle. Before he goes, he says he heard of a road where blue lights dance over marsh grass and lead travellers astray. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether such lights are lost souls, swamp vapours, fairy mischief, or merely tired men seeing what fear has already painted for them. Martin says a good lantern and dry shoes are better than an opinion. When the pilgrim leaves, the workshop feels quieter than before. The afternoon light grows thin. You return to the wicks, twisting, smoothing, hanging, over and over, small motions that seem unimportant until you imagine the flame they will carry. A wick is a path, a candle is a promise, a rushlight is a brief kindness in a poor room, and all of them begin here, between cold fingers and a cleared table, while rainwater drips from the eaves and old charms hang quietly by the hearth. By evening, the pegs are full. Rows of prepared wicks wait like pale threads of future fire. The rushlights are bundled for Widow Agnes. The linen wicks for Abbey tapers hang straight and fine. The hemp wicks look plain, sturdy, and ready for ordinary darkness. Martin studies them, then nods. Better, he says. You glance at the first crooked wick you made, set aside near the bowl of scraps. For kitchen use, you ask. For learning, he says. Outside, the bells soften into dusk. Inside, the workshop glows with one small candle burning beside the table, its flame steady on the wick Martin twisted before dawn. You watch it draw wax upward and turn it into light, and the smallness of the thing feels suddenly enormous. Morning comes with rain, not heavy enough to keep honest people indoors, but steady enough to make dishonest people pretend they have urgent business elsewhere. The town wakes under a grey sky, all slick roofs, dripping eaves, and puddles deep enough to reflect a man's entire disappointment. In the workshop, Martin has already wrapped bundles of tallow candles in rough cloth, tied them with cord, and marked the better beeswax tapers with a little notch near the base, so he can tell them apart even when buyers crowd close and opinions become loud. You carry these, he says, placing a tray in your arms. The tray is not large, but it feels important. Short tallow candles lie in rows like pale little loaves. Beside them are rushlights for Widow Agnes, 2 finer tapers ordered by a merchant's wife, and 3 small candles Martin calls pilgrim size, meaning they're light enough to carry, cheap enough to sell quickly, and humble enough not to start an argument with the church. The brown dog follows you to the door, then pauses when he sees the rain. He looks at Martin. He looks at you. He looks at the lane. Then, with the wisdom of a creature not bound by craft guild expectation, he returns to the hearth. You step outside. The mud receives you warmly, almost affectionately. By now you know its habits. It clings to the heel, sucks at the sole, climbs the ankle if encouraged, and generally behaves like a tax collector made of earth. The market square lies not far away, but every lane in a wet medieval town feels longer than promised. You pass the cooper's shed, where hoops and staves sit under a dripping awning. You pass the baker, who has opened his shutters and is selling dark loaves to women with baskets covered in linen. You pass a boy carrying eels in a bucket, and one eel makes such a determined attempt at freedom that 3 people stop to offer advice. None of it useful. At the square, the market is already forming. Stalls stand beneath canvas and patched wool awnings. Smoke lifts from a brazier where chestnuts hiss. A fishmonger arranges smoked fish with the solemn air of a bishop placing relics. A woman sells onions braided in long ropes. Another has eggs, though she guards them as if each contains a future king. Chickens wander where they should not. A pig noses near a pile of turnip greens and is shouted away by 5 separate citizens, each with the confidence of ownership. Martin sets his board beneath the lee of a stone wall near the market cross. The cross itself is worn and slick with rain, its carved saint softened by weather until he seems less holy than patient. You lay out the candles exactly as Martin instructs. Tallow to the front, beeswax behind, rushlights in bundles, stubs for trade in a little bowl. He places a small horn lantern at one corner, not for sale, but to show how a candle might sit safely within it. The first customer is Widow Agnes. She arrives with her hood pulled low and her basket tucked under one arm. She inspects the rushlights you bundled yesterday, squinting at them as though they've been accused of theft. Better peeled than last time, she says. Martin nods toward you. New hands. She looks at your hands. They are roughened by wick fibre, marked with tallow, and not nearly as clean as you remember them being in some distant former life. New hands learn, she says, and pays with 2 eggs, a twist of thread, and a rumour that the reeve has miscounted grain again. No one can quite agree whether the reeve miscounts from greed, poor eyesight, or the natural confusion that falls upon men standing near other people's barley. In market talk, all three possibilities are treated as equally likely. A toll collector comes next, though he does not buy anything. He wears a damp cap, a short cloak, and the expression of a man who has discovered authority and found it comfortable. He asks whether Martin has paid for his place. Martin produces a token from his pouch, a little stamped piece showing the town mark. The collector examines it with great care, perhaps hoping it will transform into a second payment. It is wet, the collector says. So is the town. Martin replies. The collector sniffs, moves on, and immediately slips in the mud. Not badly, but enough that the onion seller hides a smile behind her sleeve. Medieval justice does not always arrive by trumpet. Sometimes it wears a damp cap and loses an argument with a puddle. By mid-morning, the square thickens. Pilgrims pass through with badges on their hats and shells stitched to their cloaks. A wool merchant arrives with 2 servants and buys beeswax tapers, because his wife has promised a candle at the shrine if her sister's fever breaks. A young mother buys 1 small tallow candle after counting and recounting her coins. She says it is for a child's cough, to burn while prayers are spoken. Some swear a candle lit before St. Blaise can ease a throat, while others insist the true cure is honey, horehound, and keeping the child away from draughts. Even now, it is hard to tell whether the saint, the syrup, or the mother's worried hand does the most good. A monk from the abbey stops at the stall, the same round-faced cellarer who weighed the wax. He does not buy, he inspects. Martin shows him the new wicks, the pale tapers drying in cloth, and the stubs from the reliquary candle carefully wrapped. The monk nods, then lowers his voice to ask if anyone in town has been selling false beeswax mixed with sheep fat. Martin's face becomes as blank as a closed door. Some swear it, the monk says. Some swear many things. You stand very still, holding a bundle of candles, and try to look like a person who has never heard of fraud, fat, or commerce. The monk's eyes pass over you, gentle but sharp. Then he smiles faintly and buys 1 small tallow candle for the guest-house kitchen, which is either an act of humility or proof that even monks enjoy a bargain. Rain grows heavier near noon, and everyone shifts closer beneath awnings. The air smells of wet wool, trampled straw, onions, fish, smoke, damp leather, and your own candles, which release a faint fatty scent whenever someone handles them too warmly. Martin sends you to buy pottage from a woman with a steaming pot near the church steps. She ladles it into a wooden bowl peas, leek, barley, and a floating piece of something that may once have had confidence. You carry it back carefully, because spilling hot pottage in a crowded market is how feuds begin. You and Martin eat standing under the awning. The bread is coarse, the pottage is plain. The rain taps the canvas above your head in a soft, endless pattern. Around you, bargaining rises and falls like chant. 2 men argue over a goose. A girl sells little bunches of dried herbs tied with blue thread. A travelling peddler displays needles, buckles, cheap rings, and tiny lead pilgrim badges. Near the cross, the pilgrim from yesterday finds what he claims is his lost badge, though Widow Agnes whispers that it looks newly bought. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether he truly finds the same badge or simply chooses to believe he has. Either way, he pins it to his hat with visible relief, and sometimes relief is worth more than accuracy. In the afternoon, a castle servant arrives on horseback, cloak dark with rain, boots splashed to the knee. He carries an order from the keep fine candles for the hall, steady burning, clean smelling, ready before the next feast day. Martin accepts the sealed note, breaks the wax, reads slowly, and says nothing for a moment. Then he folds it and tucks it inside his pouch. "Work tonight," he says. "Of course there is." The servant buys 2 beeswax tapers to carry back, wrapped in linen and tucked inside a leather case. He glances at the cheaper tallow candles with the look of someone who has smelled ambition and chosen otherwise. When he rides away, his horse sends mud across the hem of your cloak. You look down. Martin pats your shoulder once. Now you look local. The market begins to thin as the light fades. Sellers pack their goods. The pig finally succeeds in stealing turnip greens and trots away in triumph. The toll collector returns, sees Martin's token again, and decides not to challenge the puddles a second time. You gather the remaining candles, fewer than before, and tuck the eggs from Widow Agnes safely into the basket. One cracks anyway, because medieval commerce enjoys balance. As you leave the square, the church bell sounds through the rain. You look back once at the wet market cross, the trampled straw, the closing stalls, the small trails of smoke rising into grey evening. All day. People have come for light, for prayer, for sickness, for cooking, for pride, for fear, for habit, for the simple wish not to sit in darkness after sunset. Back in the lane, the workshop sign appears through the mist, the carved candle flame catching a dull gleam. Inside wait the wrapped abbey wax, the fresh wicks, the castle order, and the long labour of making light worthy of a hall where lords eat from trenchers and pretend not to notice draughts. You step over the threshold with wet boots, sore arms, and the market still murmuring in your ears. The brown dog lifts his head from the hearth, sees that you have returned without sausages, and lowers it again with quiet disappointment. Martin sets the castle note on the table. "Best wax tonight," he says. Outside, rain darkens the town. Inside, the workshop grows warm, dim, and ready. The castle order lies on the table like a small, folded burden. Its seal has already been broken, but the red wax still clings to the parchment in flattened pieces, stamped with a device you cannot quite make out by the workshop's low light. It may be a lion, or a hound, or a very confident cabbage. Heraldry, your learning, often depends on distance, candlelight, and the imagination of whoever paid for the shield. Martin smooths the parchment with 2 fingers and reads the order again. Not because the words have changed, but because a castle hall is not a cottage kitchen. A poor candle may smoke beside a stew pot and only offend turnips. A poor candle in a lord's hall offends pride, guests, servants, steward, chaplain, and possibly ancestry. 6 long tapers, he says, 4 table lights, 2 chapel candles, beeswax. He says the last word with the gravity of a man naming both material and judgment. You help him clear the table. The cracked egg from the market is set aside for supper. The tallow candles are moved to a lower shelf. The fresh linen wicks are brought down, straight and fine from yesterday's work. Then Martin unwraps the abbey wax. At once the room changes. The smell rises golden and clean, layered beneath the smoke summer fields. Comb, hive straw, crushed clover, and something warm that seems to remember sunlight. It makes the soot-black rafters feel less severe. Even the dog opens one eye, sniffs, and decides not to object. Martin cuts the wax into pieces with a heated knife. It yields slowly, not like tallow, which softens with a greasy submission, but with a firmer, nobler reluctance. The pieces fall into the pot. He sets it over gentle heat, and as the wax begins to melt, the workshop becomes quiet in a different way. You sense that even careless movement would be rude. No water in it, Martin says. No ash. No old tallow. You nod. No hurry. You nod again, more solemnly, because this is easier than explaining that your shoulders are already tired from market day and your boots are staging a damp rebellion. The beeswax melts slowly into a pool the colour of late afternoon. Martin skims the surface. Though there is little to remove, he strains it through clean linen anyway, because castle stewards are said to see faults smaller than fleas. Some swear a steward can smell Waterdale through a wall and detect a short candle by moonlight. No one can quite agree whether this is skill, suspicion, or simply what happens when a man is paid to make everyone else uncomfortable. When the wax is ready, Martin prepares the long wicks. These will not be dipped carelessly. They must grow evenly, layer by layer, smooth enough to stand in iron prickets along the hall walls, bright enough to flatter faces at supper, steady enough not to spit wax onto sleeves trimmed with fur. A noble guest may forgive a draught, bad harp music, or tough venison if politics require it. Hot wax on velvet is another matter. You stand opposite Martin at the dipping rack. He lowers the wicks. The wax receives them without sound. He raises them slowly, and pale gold coats the linen threads. You wait as the layer cools. Then again, down and up, down and up. Each pass thickens them by almost nothing, yet after many turns, almost nothing becomes something your fingers can feel. Outside, the rain has eased. The lane murmurs with evening voices. Somewhere nearby, Widow Agnes is spinning by one of the rushlights you bundled, and perhaps she is judging the peal of each one with affectionate severity. The cooper's hammer has stopped. The town seems to draw in close around the workshop, while inside the long tapers grow in silence. Martin speaks after a while. Castle wants light before the feast. What feast? Saint's Day, or a marriage bargain, or both. Rich folk save candles for occasions that require witnesses. You imagine the hall-long tables set on trestles, trenchers of coarse bread waiting beneath meat, bowls of pottage, smoked fish, roasted fowl, pitchers of ale, dogs lurking beneath benches with professional hope. Rushes lie thick on the floor, perhaps freshened with herbs so guests may praise the household for smelling slightly less like winter. Above it all, beeswax candles burn clear and sweet, showing tapestries, iron hooks, fur collars, tired servants, sharp-eyed clerks, and the Lord's chair raised at the end. In such a hall, light is theatre. It tells every guest what the household can afford. Tallow may serve in kitchens and guardrooms, but beeswax in the hall says wealth, devotion, and good management, though usually not in that order. It says the Lord honours God, welcomes guests, and has enough coin to turn summer into flame while others sit in smoke. The table candles are made shorter and thicker. Martin shapes them with practised hands, rolling the warm wax against a board to smooth small ridges. He lets you try. Your first candle leans slightly, not enough to collapse, but enough to look as if it has overheard discouraging news. For a corner, Martin says, of the hall of the kitchen. Then he takes it, warms it gently, and shows you how to coax it straight. The correction is slow, pressure, turn, pause, not force. Wax has memory, he says, and if pressed too sharply, it cracks. You think of people, horses, old doors, and perhaps even towns under tax collectors, and decide many things have memory when bent. Night gathers fully before the candles are finished. Martin lights one small tallow lamp for working and shields the beeswax from stray soot. The castle candles hang in a row, golden and still, their surfaces dull until polished. They're beautiful. though not in a jewelled way. Their beauty lies in usefulness made careful. A knock comes at the door. Martin freezes for half a breath, then opens it. A castle servant stands outside under a hood, the same rider from the market, though now on foot and carrying a lantern. Beside him waits a younger boy with a mule. Rain beads on their shoulders. The servant asks whether the first tapers may be ready enough to take tonight. Martin considers. 2. He wraps the 2 straightest long candles in linen. The servant inspects them near his horn lantern, sniffing the wax, checking the length with his thumb, and looking along each taper as if it were a spear. He nods, pays a deposit in small coins, and tells Martin the rest must be brought to the keep tomorrow by dusk. After they leave, Martin counts the coins once, then twice, then puts them in a clay jar hidden behind a shelf. Medieval banking, it seems, consists largely of remembering which cracked jar matters. You sleep late by workshop standards, which means not late at all. The next day is grey but no longer raining. Martin packs the finished candles carefully into a wooden carrying case lined with cloth. The dog insists on coming, perhaps because castles are rumoured to contain bones. You leave the town by the upper gate and follow the road toward the keep. The castle rises from a low hill beyond fields glazed with wet light. Its walls are not fairy tale white, but practical grey, streaked with damp, patched where stones have weathered loose. Smoke pours from chimneys. A banner stirs weakly. At the outer gate, men-at-arms watch from beneath helmets, and one of them asks what you carry. Light, Martin says. The guard opens the case, sees candles, and looks faintly disappointed that they are not weapons. Wine, or something more worth gossiping about. You pass through into a yard alive with movement, horses stamping, servants carrying wood, a boy hauling water, a woman scolding 2 geese with admirable courage. The smell is hay, iron, dung, roasting meat, wet wool, and smoke. Inside the hall. The light is dim even by day. High windows admit a thin grey wash. The roof beams vanish into shadow. Along the walls hang shields, antlers, and old cloths whose colours have faded but still try to be grand. Rushes cover the floor, and you notice orange peel, rosemary, and perhaps lavender scattered among them. Some swear sweet-strewing herbs discourage fleas. Others say fleas are merely encouraged to dine in better surroundings. The steward meets you near the high table. He is narrow, tidy, and terrifying without raising his voice. Martin presents the candles. The steward examines each one, measuring by eye, testing weight, smelling for tallow. You stand very still, holding the case, while the dog wisely waits outside with a kitchen boy. At last the steward nods. They will serve. From him, this sounds like a ballad of praise. Servants set 2 tapers into iron stands near the dais, and 1 chapel candle aside for the priest. For a moment, Martin lights a taper to test the burn. The flame catches cleanly. It stands upright, quiet, golden. The scent of beeswax opens in the hall, softening the smell of rushes and smoke. Shadows draw back from the carved chair, the table boards, the stone wall, the waiting trenchers. You watch faces turn toward the flame. Not in wonder. Exactly. People hear no candles, but they feel it. The change from gloom to warmth, from grey to gold. The hall becomes more itself under the light. Status shines. Prayer becomes visible. Supper will look richer than it is. The Lord will seem kinder if the shadows fall correctly. Even the steward looks briefly less like a judgment delivered in shoes. Martin pinches the flame out after the test, saving every breath of wax. The smoke curls upward, thin and sweet. As you leave the hall, the chapel bell rings somewhere within the keep, small and silver. Outside, the dog trots back to you with no bone but great confidence. You walk down through the yard and out beneath the gate, lighter by one burden and heavier with the knowledge of what candles can mean. In a cottage, they help a hand find a bowl. In a workshop, they are labour. In a church, they are offering. In a castle hall, they are power made gentle enough to glow. Behind you, the keep settles into evening, and somewhere inside your candles wait to burn before Lord, servant, saint, and supper alike. The road back from the keep carries you downhill through wet fields, where the last light lies thin upon the furrows, and the castle behind you slowly loses its edges. The dog trots ahead, tail lifted, occasionally glancing back to ensure you're still following his excellent leadership. Martin walks beside you as the empty candle case under one arm and the steward's payment tucked somewhere inside his coat, in whatever secret fold candle makers reserve for coins, folded lists, and private worries. The chapel bell from the keep fades first, then the town bell rises to meet it, low and familiar beyond the roofs, farther still from the abbey. Another bell answers through the damp air. For a moment, the whole country seems held together by bronze voices: castle, town, monastery, each one calling the hours in its own tone, each one insisting that time belongs partly to God and partly to whoever must finish work before dark. You cross the fields slowly. Your boots are heavy with mud. A crow lifts from a hedge and complains at your passing. Near a ditch, someone has tied a strip of cloth to a thorn branch beside a little roadside shrine, where a painted saint peers from a niche beneath a crooked roof. Some swear that leaving cloth at such places carries sickness away from the body, especially if the cloth has touched the aching part. No one can quite agree whether the saint accepts the burden, the thorn traps it, or the sufferer simply feels better for having done something. In a world with cold feet, bad teeth, and damp beds, doing something is often medicine enough. By the time you reach the town gate, the guards are preparing to close it. The same bearded man in the fur-lined cloak stands under the arch, looking as though the entire concept of evening is a personal inconvenience. He nods to Martin, eyes the empty case, and asks whether the castle paid fairly. Fairly enough to ask again. Martin says. The guard grunts. This seems to satisfy all legal, economic, and philosophical requirements. Inside the town, the lanes are slick and shining. Smoke sinks under the eaves. A woman empties a pail into the gutter with a splash that narrowly misses your boots, though by now it would hardly make a difference. Children are being called indoors. Shutters close one by one. The baker's oven breathes its last warmth through a crack in the wall, and the smell of bread makes your stomach remember that pottage at market was many hours and several hills ago. Martin does not turn toward the workshop. Instead, he leads you toward the Abbey Lane. We stop at the guest house, he says. You follow without asking why, because you have learned that questions in medieval life often receive answers shaped like extra chores. The monastery outer gate stands open just wide enough for late arrivals. A lay brother lets you in after recognizing Martin, though he looks at the dog with the wary expression of a man who has once lost a sausage under suspicious circumstances. The abbey yard is dim, lit by shielded lamps and the last blue of evening. Wet stone reflects little flames. Somewhere, monks chant behind the church wall, the sound low and even, like breath through sleep. The guest house is a plain building near the outer court, meant for travellers, pilgrims, messengers, and those whose rank earns them shelter but not necessarily comfort. Inside, rushes cover the floor. A fire burns low. The air smells of damp wool, wood smoke, cabbage broth, and the faint clean trace of beeswax from a lamp near a small painted cross. Several travellers sit along benches, 2 pilgrims with scallop badges, a carter rubbing his knees, a quiet woman with a bundle tied in blue cloth, and a thin man who may be a clerk, judging by the ink stains on his fingers and the exhausted dignity of his posture. A brother gives you a wooden bowl of broth with barley and leek, and a heel of coarse bread. You sit near the wall, close enough to the fire to feel warmth on one side and monastery draught on the other. This, you suspect, is how balance was invented. The broth is simple, salty, and wonderful. Martin eats silently. The dog sits under the bench and places his chin upon your boot, as if to remind you that Christian charity may extend downward. Across the room, the ink-stained clerk complains softly that his candle smoked last night and spoiled the edge of a charter. The lay brother tells him that perhaps the charter deserved humbling. The clerk does not laugh, but the carter does, quietly into his bowl. You look toward the little lamp near the cross. It burns with a steady beeswax flame, clear and pale gold. Around it, shadows move gently over the wall. The cross is painted in red and blue, with tiny dots of gilding that catch the light. Beside it sits a small reliquary box, locked, dark, and polished by many careful hands. Martin notices your glance. Toe bone. He murmurs. Whose? He shrugs. Depends who is visiting. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether the relic belongs to a local saint, a Roman martyr, or someone who once had very persuasive friends. Yet the travellers lower their voices near it all the same. Doubt may live in the mind, but reverence often settles in the hands, the shoulders, the way people move more gently around a locked little box. After supper, a novice comes through carrying fresh candles for the guest house. He's young, narrow-faced, and serious enough to make you feel that smiling too suddenly might damage him. Martin inspects the candles by habit. They are decent tallow, not his, slightly smoky at the wick. The novice admits they were made in the abbey yard by a brother who prefers brewing ale and considers candles a punishment. Trim the wick lower, Martin advises. The novice nods as if receiving a theological correction. You watch him move from lamp to lamp, replacing spent ends, saving every stub in a small pouch. Even here, in a house of prayer, nothing is wasted. Candle ends return to pots, rushes are turned, ashes are kept for lye, bones become broth, old parchment may be scraped. Time itself is broken into bells and used carefully, though everyone still seems to run short of it. The monastery bell rings again, close enough that you feel it in your chest. The travellers quiet. The pilgrims cross themselves. The clerk closes his eyes. Outside, rain begins once more, very softly, like fingers brushing the roof. Some swear that bells drive away storms, demons, and wandering spirits. Others say they merely call monks to prayer and birds from towers. Even now, it is hard to tell whether the sound protects the world or simply reminds it to be less afraid. You sit with your bowl empty in your hands, warmed by broth and fire, tired from the castle road. The flame by the cross leans, straightens, and continues. You think of the hall where your candles wait unlit until feast day. You think of Widow Agnes spinning by rushlight, of the pilgrim with his badge, of the butcher's boy carrying a candle home like treasure. Light moves through this world from hand to hand, never staying long, always changing what it touches. Later, you and Martin rise to leave. The lay brother gives him a small bundle of chapel stubs to melt down, payment for advice about the smoky guest house candles. Martin accepts them with the gravity of a formal treaty. Outside, the yard is dark and wet. The abbey church looms above you, windows faint with hidden lamps. Chant drifts through stone, soft and steady. The town gate is already closed, but Martin knows the small postern near the abbey lane, and the guard lets you in after a sleepy exchange involving names, complaints, and one candle promised for the gatehouse. You return through lanes almost empty now. Your workshop sign appears at last, barely visible in the rain. Inside, the room is cold but familiar. Martin lays the chapel stubs beside the wrapped wax. You hang your cloak near the hearth. The dog collapses with theatrical hardship beside the ashes. As Martin wakes the coals, a small glow opens under the grey. The workshop breathes again. Outside, bells fade into rain. Inside, among wicks, stubs, herbs, and old charms, you warm your hands and feel the day settle behind you. Not finished exactly, but folded into the quiet store of things that will become tomorrow's light. The alehouse is not far from the workshop, which is fortunate, because by the time Martin decides you should go there, the rain has turned the lane into a narrow brown ribbon of regret. The coals are banked, the chapel stubs from the monastery are set aside, and the wrapped beeswax has been checked once more, because good wax seems to make Martin both calmer and more suspicious. He takes a short tallow candle from a lower shelf, slips it into his pouch, and nods toward the door. "You should hear what folk say of candles," he says. "This sounds less like an evening's rest and more like an inspection disguised as supper, but your stomach accepts the arrangement before your pride can object. Outside, the town is mostly dark. Shutters are closed, roofs drip. The church tower is a black shape above the lanes, and from somewhere beyond it comes the faint sound of a cart being pushed under cover. You keep close to Martin, stepping where he steps, though this does not save you from the puddles. Medieval streets, you have learned, are less roads than complicated weather lying down. The alehouse shows itself by sound before light low voices, a burst of laughter, a bench scraping, someone singing 3 notes and then wisely abandoning the attempt. A horn lantern hangs by the door, its yellow glow blurred through the scraped horn. Inside, the room is warm, smoky, and crowded enough that everyone seems to be sharing everyone else's elbows. Rushes cover the floor, darkened by boots and spilled ale. A fire burns in a shallow hearth, sending smoke upward toward rafters already black as old iron. Along the walls sit villagers, carters, apprentices, 2 market women, the bearded gate guard from the town arch, and a pilgrim whose badges clink whenever he lifts his cup. A pot of pottage hangs near the fire, and the air smells of ale, damp wool, onions, smoke, wet leather, and humanity doing its best in poor ventilation. Martin finds a place near the wall. You sit beside him on a bench polished by countless tired backsides. The alewife brings wooden cups and a trencher with coarse bread, soft cheese, and a scrap of smoked fish so salty it may have once been preserved by insult alone. The ale is weak but welcome. It tastes of grain, smoke, and the blessed fact that it is not rainwater. The gate guard lifts his cup toward Martin. "Candle man, gate man." Martin replies. This appears to be a complete conversation. The alewife notices Martin's pouch. "You bring me a better light," Martin pulls out the tallow candle. "Better than sitting in darkness. That is not the same thing." "No," he says, It is cheaper. She laughs and sets the candle in an iron holder near the hearth. When she lights it, the flame wavers, steadies, then begins its little work. It is not the clean gold of beeswax. It has a faint smoky edge, and the smell of tallow curls into the room. No one complains. In a place already full of smoke, damp cloaks, and pottage, a tallow candle is hardly the boldest offender. Conversation drifts around you. A carter claims he saw pale blue lights dancing over the marsh road last winter, flickering where no honest lantern could stand. The pilgrim says such lights are souls asking for prayer. The gate guard says they are swamp vapours. The alewife says they are excuses invented by men who lose their way after drinking. No one can quite agree whether ghost lights lure travellers into bogs, warn of danger, or simply reveal which men should not be trusted with directions. Martin listens without correcting anyone. Candle makers, it seems, benefit from every kind of darkness, whether spiritual, marshy, or ale-related. A market woman leans forward and tells of a candle that burned blue in her cousin's house the night before a death. Another swears that if a flame gutters without wind, someone nearby has spoken a lie. The gate guard says that cannot be true, because if lies made flames gutter, the manor court would be dark by noon from all the candles exhausting themselves. This earns quiet laughter, the careful kind people use when joking about officials who may have relatives in the room. You think of the manor court you've heard mentioned in the market tenants owing rents, disputes over pigs, boundaries argued by men pointing at ditches, fines counted on a table while some clerk writes with ink-black fingers. Candles burn there too. Perhaps tallow by day in winter, beeswax if someone important visits. A small flame beside a record book can decide who owes barley, who may graze sheep, who must mend a hedge, and who has insulted whose goat beyond reasonable measure. The alewife trims the candlewick with a small knife, pinching away the charred end. Martin nods approval. A trimmed wick burns cleaner. Left too long, it smokes and mushrooms, wasting fuel and blackening the holder. In some houses, people use little snuffers, in poorer ones, fingers, knives, or whatever tool is not currently in the soup. Some swear that pinching out a flame with wet fingers brings luck. Others say it brings blisters if one is foolish enough. Even now. It is hard to tell whether luck favours the careful or merely avoids the dramatic. A thin old man near the fire begins to speak of corpse candles seen along the churchyard wall, tiny flames moving low over the ground before a burial. His voice softens as he tells it, and the room quiets. Not out of fear exactly, but because old stories have a way of pulling the rafters lower. Those who tell the tale never fully agree, he says, whether such lights are warnings, prayers, or the dead finding their road. The pilgrim crosses himself. The alewife mutters that the dead should kindly use the main path and stop troubling respectable women at washing time. Your cup warms between your hands, rain taps the shutters. The candle Martin brought burns lower, making a small pool of melted tallow at its base. You watch the flame bend whenever the door opens and someone slips in from the dark, wet and hunched. Each arrival changes the room a gust of cold, a smell of mud, a new voice, a brief widening of shadows, then warmth folding around them. A young man with a bandaged hand sits near Martin and asks whether beeswax truly burns longer than tallow. Martin says yes, if the wick is right. The young man says he heard beeswax also keeps away night terrors. Martin says a calm conscience helps, though wax may be easier to purchase. The young man considers this with the seriousness of a person unsure which is cheaper. Near the hearth, a woman rubs her child's chest with a cloth smelling of thyme and goose grease. She says the child coughs worse after sunset. Another woman advises a charm under the pillow, 3 knots tied while naming saints. A third recommends onion syrup. No one can quite agree which remedy works, but all agree drafts are wicked. Damp straw is worse, and children should be kept warm if anyone can afford enough fuel to do so. The dog appears beneath the table sometime after the second cup of ale, though no one saw him enter. He sits beside your boot and looks upward with such patient tragedy that the alewife gives him a scrap of fish. Martin sighs but does not send him away. Perhaps the dog is now part of the trade, like wick fibre and unpaid opinions. As the evening deepens, the talk grows softer. Not silent, only slower. Men lean closer to their cups. The pilgrim rubs his badge between thumb and forefinger. The gate guard yawns. The alewife replaces the smoky candle with another stub, saving the remains in a bowl near the hearth. Candle ends, like rumours. Travel onward. Martin turns to you at last. Hear them. You nod. What you hear is not merely superstition, though there is plenty of that. You hear how people measure the dark. A clean flame means health, honesty, holy favour, good wax, proper wick, careful hands. A smoky flame means poor craft, bad air, dampness, spirits, lies, coming death, or simply a wick in need of trimming. Light is never just light here. It is red like weather, like faces, like the flight of birds. When you leave, the rain has softened to mist again. The alehouse glow remains behind you, blurred and golden through horn and smoke. The dog trots ahead as if he has personally negotiated the night. The town is quiet, but not empty. Behind shutters, candles burn in low rooms. A mother watches a child breathe. A widow spins. A clerk scratches one more line. A guard waits by the gate. Each flame holds a small circle open against the dark. Back at the workshop, Martin sets the saved alehouse stub beside the monastery stubs and the market scraps. Wax from prayer, fat from kitchens, flame from gossip, all gathered into the same future pot. You lie down near the hearth with smoke in your hair, ale warmth in your chest, and the voices of the alehouse still murmuring like rain behind your eyes. The workshop is darker after the alehouse, as if the room has been waiting with its hands folded, patiently aware that all warmth borrowed from cups and company must eventually be repaid in work. Martin closes the door against the mist, bars it with the iron latch, and stirs the hearth until the coals glow red beneath their ash. The dog circles twice near your palate, then settles with a sigh so large it suggests he has personally carried the entire town through hardship. You would like to sleep, naturally. Martin lifts the wax pot. Dipping, he says. There are words in every age that extinguish hope. Tonight, that is one of them. The castle order is finished, but the market has thinned the shelves. Widow Agnes needs more rushlights. The Abbey guest house has smoky candles to replace, and ordinary darkness continues to be an unreasonable customer. So Martin sets the pot over gentle heat and adds saved scraps the alehouse stub, trimmed chapel ends, a few pale shavings from the castle tapers, and a handful of clean tallow pieces cut small. Nothing is wasted. Even light has leftovers. The mixture melts slowly. Tallow clouds the gold. Beeswax lends sweetness to the heavier smell. Smoke gathers under the rafters. Outside, the town quiets until only rainwater, distant hooves, and the occasional cough behind a wall remain. Somewhere, the church bell marks the late hour, but softly, as if it too would rather not wake anyone. Martin hangs prepared wicks from the dipping rack. You stand beside him, sleeves rolled, hands still rough from twisting thread. He shows you the line of the work again lower. Lift, drip, hang, wait. Lower, lift, drip, hang, wait. The motion is simple enough to become boring and exact enough to punish boredom. If you rush, the layers wrinkle. If you dream too far, the candles grow lopsided. If you hold them too long above the pot, drips harden into tails that must be trimmed away later. No one can quite agree whether candle making is a craft of patience or merely a polite form of endurance. By this hour, you suspect it is both. You lower the first row of wicks. They vanish into the warm pool, then return shining and thinly coated. Drops fall back with soft ticks. Martin watches your wrist. Slower. You slow. Straighter. You straighten. Do not breathe like you are fighting it. You'd not realized your breathing had become part of the problem, but medieval labour has a talent for discovering faults in a person. Again the wicks go down, and again they rise. After several rounds, they begin to look less like threads and more like the idea of candles. The layers are delicate at first, tender and easily spoiled. Martin turns the rack so the cooling air reaches each side. In cold weather, candles set faster, but too much chill can make them crack. In summer, the work is softer, slower, and more likely to attract flies, which may be why winter seems to carry a private grudge against comfort but a kindness toward wax. The dog snores. You envy him deeply. On the shelf, the charms hang still red thread by the hearth. Rowan at the window, the cracked horseshoe above the door. Some swear that a candle made at night is more powerful against storms if the maker keeps silent while dipping. Others say silence only keeps apprentices from complaining. Even now, it is hard to tell whether Martin believes either version, because he has said almost nothing for half an hour and looks entirely satisfied. The work becomes hypnotic. Down and up, drip and wait. The candle bodies thicken, one faint skin at a time. The room glows only by the hearth, and one small working flame shielded in a horn pane. Shadows move across the walls like slow water. The soot-black rafters disappear into darkness, and the hanging candles seem to float there, pale and unfinished, like winter reeds in moonlight. Your shoulders ache. Your eyes grow heavy. Martin notices and hands you a crust of bread spread with a little dripping and salt. It is not elegant, but it wakes your body enough to continue. He takes a swallow of thin ale and offers you the cup. You drink. The ale is sour, cool, and ordinary, which makes it precious. Outside, a watchman passes, calling the hour in a low voice. His lantern light slides across the shutter crack and disappears. You imagine him walking the walls, wrapped in damp wool, carrying a spear, listening for trouble in a town where most trouble is asleep, drunk, or pretending to be a pig. Somewhere near the gate, perhaps, one of your tallow candles burns beside him, smoking a little when the wind slips through the stones. Martin begins shaping the thicker candles. After enough dipping, he takes them down and rolls them on a smooth board, pressing gently to even their sides. He trims the bottoms. He straightens a leaning pair by warming them near the fire and coaxing them back into line. Wax remembers pressure. He told you at the castle, and tonight you see how true it is. Every careless moment remains visible unless corrected with warmth and patience. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether the best candles are born from good materials, good hands, or good weather. Martin says all three help, but poor hands can ruin what bees and saints provide. By midnight, or whatever hour your bones insist is midnight, the first batch hangs complete. They're not grand like the castle tapers, but they are solid, pale, useful candles, fit for households that count coins carefully. Martin marks the crooked ones for kitchens and the cleanest for sale near the market cross. He sets aside a dozen for the Abbey guest house with shorter wicks, so the clerk with the smoky charter may suffer less dramatically. Then comes the second batch. You look at him. He looks at the empty wicks. The dog, sensing tension, rolls onto his other side and continues sleeping. The next candles are smaller, cheaper, quicker, made with more tallow and less wax. The smell is heavier. Your fingers become slick. The pot must be kept warm but not hot enough to undo the layers. Martin lets you manage the rhythm alone for several rounds while he trims finished candles. You feel a small pride when the roux comes up even, shining faintly, each wick coated neatly. It is not praise, exactly, but Martin does not correct you, and silence from a master can be a very warm blanket. A mouse moves somewhere behind the sacks. The dog opens one eye but decides the mouse may continue its earthly pilgrimage. Martin sprinkles a little dried mint near the shelf, not for spirits this time, but to discourage mice from nibbling tallow candles. Some swear mice prefer candles made on Fridays. Martin says mice prefer whatever is left where they can reach it, which is one of the more convincing doctrines you have heard. The final hour softens. The rain stops. The town beyond the shutters becomes deeply quiet. You no longer think much in words. Your body knows the movement now lower, lift, drip, wait. Candle after candle grows in the dark, each one gathering thin layers of labour around a hidden thread. At last Martin covers the pot. He hangs the final row and studies them by the working flame. His face is tired, lined with smoke and gold light. Enough, he says. The word falls gently. You clean the table in near silence. Scraps into the bowl. Wick ends saved, knife wiped, hearth banked. Finished candles hung where rats cannot reach them. Draughts cannot bend them, and careless apprentices cannot knock them down while half asleep. Before you lie down, you look once more at the dipping rack. Rows of candles hang above you, each one made from repeated returns into warmth, into air, into patience, into shape. Tomorrow they will leave in baskets, be traded for eggs, coins, prayers, or favours, and vanish into other rooms. Tonight they rest here, pale and quiet, like a small forest of sleeping flames. You settle on the pallet. The dog presses against your feet. The last working candle burns low near the hearth, its flame steady on a well-twisted wick. Outside, the first hint of dawn waits somewhere beyond the roofs, but not yet. For now, there is only the dim workshop, the smell of wax and smoke, the ache in your hands, and the strange comfort of having helped the dark become a little less certain. Dawn finds you before you are ready, as dawn often does in a world that has never heard of mercy after late work. The workshop is grey and cold, the coals low, the candles from the night before hanging above you in pale rows. For one still moment, before Martin moves, before the dog yawns, before the lane begins its wet little noises, the room seems to hold its breath. Then the Abbey bell sounds in the distance. Martin rises. You rise more slowly, with the deep dignity of someone whose shoulders have become rented property. Today's candles are for the pilgrim road. Not Grand Castle tapers, not market bundles, not rushlights for Widow Agnes, but small, sturdy lights meant for shrines, road chapels, wayside crosses, and travellers who carry more hope than money. Martin wraps them in cloth and packs them into a basket beside a heel of coarse bread, a piece of hard cheese, 2 onions, and a flask of thin ale. He gives you the basket, of course. The dog appears at the door before anyone invites him, proving once again that he understands every journey as a possible food event. The morning outside is sharp with frost. It rims the thatch, whitens cartwheels, and turns the mud into a crust that breaks under your boots with a soft, tired crackle. Smoke rises straight from chimneys. The town gate stands open just enough for early travellers, and the bearded guard stamps his feet beneath his cloak. "Road's slick," he says. Road's always something. Martin replies, "This, too, appears to be a complete philosophy." Beyond the town wall, the world opens into fields. Frost lies across the furrows like linen spread for a feast no one can afford. Crows hop among the ridges. A thin mist lifts from the low ground near the river. Your breath shows before you, and the basket creaks against your arm. Each step carries the faint smell of the candle's tallow, a little beeswax, a whisper of smoke from the workshop, and the hidden labour of the night. The pilgrim road is not one road so much as a habit worn into the land. It bends past hedges, skirts a frozen ditch, climbs toward a line of bare trees, and passes small markers where travellers have stopped, prayed, argued, eaten, slept, or regretted their shoes. Here and there, little offerings hang from branches, strips of cloth, carved wooden tokens, a broken bead, a feather tied with thread. Some swear that tying a thread beside a road shrine helps guide prayers onward, especially for those who cannot travel farther. Others say threads are simply what poor people have when they cannot spare coins. No one can quite agree whether heaven notices the difference, and perhaps that is a mercy. You walk slowly, alternating between movement and pauses, because Martin refuses to hurry on Frost. He says a broken leg costs more than an early arrival, and this is hard to dispute. The dog ranges ahead, nose down, investigating smells that appear to contain whole histories invisible to humans. At the first shrine, a stone niche holds a painted image of St. Christopher carrying the Christ child through water. The colours are faded, but the saint's large feet remain impressive. Beneath the niche sits a shallow dish blackened by old flames. Martin kneels, removes 3 small candles, and sets them upright in the iron pricks fixed to the stone ledge. He does not light them yet. These are for pilgrims to buy or offer, a roadside keeper, an old woman who lives in a hut nearby. We'll tend them when she comes. You leave the candles wrapped against damp, tucked beneath the niche where rain cannot reach. The hut door opens. The old woman appears, wrapped in a brown cloak, her hair hidden under a linen coif. Her name is Eleanor, and her eyes are bright enough to count coins through fog. She greets Martin, takes the candles, and pays partly in pennies, partly in dried apples, and partly in news. A cart broke near the lower shrine yesterday. A pilgrim lost a shoe crossing the ford, and someone claims to have seen a white hare near the gallows road. Martin raises an eyebrow. Bad omen, you ask softly. Depends if you are the hare, he says. Eleanor says some swear a white hare is a soul in disguise, or a witch travelling quickly, or just an animal with poor judgment about visibility. Even now, it is hard to tell whether such tales grow from fear, boredom, or the need to explain why the world keeps moving strangely at the edge of sight. You continue along the road as the sun climbs weakly behind cloud. Frost melts from the hedges and drops in tiny silver beads. A group of pilgrims joins the path behind you, 2 men, 1 woman, and a boy carrying a staff taller than himself. Their cloaks are patched, their hats damp, and each wears a badge ashell, a little stamped saint, a cross sewn in dark thread. They greet Martin warmly when they see the basket. Candles, one asks. For shrines, Martin says. For knees, the woman asks, pointing to her husband. Candles do not fix knees, Martin says. But they may make the praying look more serious. The husband buys one anyway. You rest with them beside a low wall where the road overlooks winter fields. Martin shares bread. The pilgrims share a handful of nuts and a story about a spring said to cure sore eyes if visited before sunrise on a saint's day. Those who tell the tale never fully agree which saint, which sunrise, or how sore the eyes must be. The boy says he would rather visit a spring that cures hunger. Everyone approves this suggestion. You watch Martin wrap the purchased candle in scrap linen and show the man how to keep it dry. A candle carried by a pilgrim is more than merchandise. It is a small promise, a light meant for a chapel perhaps miles away, where it will burn for a vow, a fever, a dead parent, a safe birth, a debt of gratitude, or a fear too private to name. The road moves again. You pass a field where peasants cut brush along a hedge, their hands red with cold. One lifts a cap to Martin. Another asks if the town has heard when the manor court will sit. Martin says soon, perhaps after the feast. The man groans, because manor courts, like winter, arrive whether one is emotionally prepared or not. By midday, you reach the second shrine, set beneath 3 twisted trees near a ford. Water slides over stones with a glassy sound. The shrine is smaller than the first, a wooden box on a post, roofed with slate, holding a little painted Virgin and Child darkened by years of candle smoke. The ledge below is crusted with old wax. Someone has left a ribbon, a crust of bread, and a child's wooden bead. Martin scrapes old wax carefully into a pouch. Even shrine leavings return to the workshop. Nothing is too holy to be reused, provided one does it respectfully and perhaps while looking over one's shoulder. You set fresh candles in a small bundle behind the box. The pilgrims light one of theirs from Martin's tinder. The flame catches slowly, then steadies, gold against the grey day. Everyone falls quiet. Even the dog sits, though this may be because the bread offering has caught his eye. For a moment, the cold road, the aching feet, the muddy hems, the patched cloaks, the worry of tolls and weather all soften around that single flame. It burns small, but it gathers the world close. Then the wind shifts, the flame bends, and Martin shields it with his hand until it steadies again. You stand there beside him, on the pilgrim road at frostfall, and understand a little more. Candles travel where people cannot stay. They keep watch after the pilgrim moves on. They speak softly in flame when words have been spent. They make a lonely shrine feel attended. When you turn back toward town, the sky is already dimming at the edges. The basket is lighter now, but your arms still ache. The dog trots ahead, carrying something in his mouth that Martin firmly refuses to identify. Behind you, the shrine candle flickers beneath the twisted trees, a small, stubborn brightness beside the ford, waiting with the road. The road home should be easier with a basket lighter, but roads in winter have a talent for taking offence at optimism. Frost has softened into slick mud, and every rut holds grey water under a skin of broken ice. The pilgrims have gone ahead toward the next village. The shrine candle still burning behind you beneath the twisted trees, and the dog trots along the hedge with the proud secrecy of a creature carrying forbidden treasure. Martin walks slowly, listening. At first you think he listens for weather or bells or the creak of branches in the cold. Then you hear it too, the uneven clatter of a cartwheel, followed by a sharp wooden crack and a voice saying something very rude for so holy a road. Around the bend, A small cart leans beside a roadside shrine, one wheel sunk deep into the mud, the rim split, the axle tilted like a drunk trying to look dignified. A carter stands beside it with both hands on his hips. His wife sits on a bundle of sacks, wrapped in a grey cloak. A mule watches everyone with the blank calm of an animal who has long expected human failure. The shrine is no grand thing, only a carved post beneath a little roof, with a painted saint whose face has nearly vanished under smoke and weather. Wax drips crust the ledge. Strips of cloth flutter from a thorn bush nearby. Some swear this saint protects wheels, hooves, and travellers delayed through no fault of their own. No one can quite agree whether the saint has been informed of this duty. Martin sets down the basket and kneels by the broken wheel. You hold the remaining candles and try to look useful. The carter explains too much. The wife explains less, but more accurately. Between them, it becomes clear that the wheel struck a hidden stone. The rim cracked, and the cart will not move until patched. You gather brushwood from the hedge while Martin helps lift the cart enough for the carter to wedge a stone beneath the axle. Your fingers sting with cold. The dog finally drops his mysterious prize, which turns out to be a very old crust of bread, and then looks offended when no one celebrates. Soon a small fire burns near the shrine, low and careful, shielded from wind by stones. The carter's wife shares coarse bread and a little smoked fish. Martin contributes dried apples from Eleanor. You pass the food hand to hand, eating slowly while the cartwheel waits under repair. A candle is lit at the shrine, one of yours, short and plain. Its flame bends in the wind, then steadies behind Martin's cupped palm. The carter crosses himself. His wife mutters a prayer for the wheel, the mule, and her husband's judgment, not necessarily in that order. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether roadside delays are curses, warnings, or simply bad joinery meeting worse mud. But as you sit by the small fire, with bread warming in your hand and candlelight touching the broken wheel, the delay feels less like misfortune and more like the road asking everyone to breathe. Martin shows you how the rim may be bound temporarily with a strip of leather and an iron nail hammered through an old hole. It will not last far, he says, but perhaps far enough. The carter nods as if perhaps is a fine engineering principle, which, on medieval roads, it often is. The sky lowers toward evening. Bells sound faintly from somewhere beyond the fields, too distant to name. Castle, abbey, town, one of them, calling the hour through cold air. You think of all the candles already scattered behind you at shrines, in halls, beside beds, in alehouses, near ink-stained hands, small lights waiting where people fear, hope, bargain, cough, mend, pray, and lose wheels. When the cart finally lurches upright, everyone watches the patched wheel turn once, twice, then hold. The mule sighs in disappointment, perhaps having hoped for retirement. The carter thanks Martin with 2 onions and a promise of tallow after next slaughtering. Martin accepts both with equal seriousness. Before leaving, the carter's wife presses a little charm into your hand, a knot of blue thread tied around a thorn. She says it keeps travellers from losing their way. Even now, it is hard to tell whether it protects the walker, marks the road, or merely gives the hand something to hold when mist gathers. You tuck it into your pouch. The walk back is quieter. The basket is nearly empty. Your boots are heavy. The dog keeps close now, perhaps tired, perhaps repentant, perhaps only disappointed by the crust. Behind you, the repaired cart creaks along the lane in the opposite direction, and the shrine candle burns low beside the thorn bush, watching over mud, wheel tracks, and all the little delays that become part of a life. By the time the town walls appear through the dimness, you feel the day inside your bones frost road, shrine smoke, shared bread, broken wood, cold hands, and one small flame held steady against the wind. The town receives you at dusk with its usual kindness, which is to say, with mud, smoke, and a guard who asks where you have been as though the answer might personally improve his evening. Martin tells him you have been on the pilgrim road, leaving candles at shrines and helping mend a wheel. The guard looks at the dog, who has burrs in his fur and the expression of a beast who has seen too much road. Dog help, the guard asks. Spiritually, Martin says. The guard grunts and waves you in. Inside the walls, the lanes are closing into night, doors draw shut. A woman beats mud from a hem with more energy than hope. Somewhere a pot lid clatters, and the smell of pottage slips from a window, thick with cabbage and barley. The blue thread thorn charm rests in your pouch, small and stiff against your hip, and though you do not fully believe in it, you notice your hand touches it whenever a shadow moves too quickly near the wall. The workshop glows faintly ahead, but Martin does not stop there. Instead, he leads you beyond the market square toward the manor storehouse, a long, low building of timber and stone near the Reeves house. Its roof sags in the middle, not enough to collapse, but enough to suggest it has considered the matter. Two men unload sacks of grain beneath the watch of a clerk whose fingers are black with ink and whose nose is red with cold. Candles for counting, Martin murmurs. You understand only when you step inside. The storehouse smells of grain, dry straw, old wood, mice, apples, onions, wool, salt fish, and winter fare carefully arranged on shelves. Barrels line one wall, sacks are stacked in rows, smoked meat hangs from beams, bundles of rushes are tied near the door. In one corner, locked behind oak planks, stand the goods reserved for manor business records, seals, spare ironwork, lengths of cloth, and candles counted like coin. The Reeve meets Martin near a table. He is a narrow man with a trimmed beard, a wool cap, and the weary sharpness of someone blamed for both too much grain and not enough. Beside him, the ink-stained clerk opens a ledger and dips his quill. Winter stores, the Reeve says. Court soon. Feast after. We need light that does not shame the hall. Martin places the remaining candles from the basket on the table, then adds a wrapped bundle from his cloak household tapers made in the night. Sturdier than shrine candles, plainer than castle wax. The Reeve lifts one, smells it, and nods. Some wax in this. Some. Martin says. Not much. Enough to make the tallow remember manners. The clerk gives a dry little cough that may be laughter trying not to lose its position. You stand by the sacks and watch the counting. Candles are listed by number, length, quality, and intended use. Larger ones for manor court, smaller ones for servants' work, smoky ones for outer rooms where no one of rank is expected to breathe deeply. You had not imagined candles could belong to administration, yet here they are entered beside barley, beans, salted fish, and repairs owed to fences. A manor court, Martin explains softly while the Reeve argues over price, is where tenants come to answer for rents. Grazing rights, broken hedges, wandering pigs, disputed ditches, and all the little frictions that keep village life from becoming too peaceful. The lord may not be present, the steward may preside. The clerk writes everything down, and because winter afternoons fade early, candles must burn while men swear they paid, women swear they witnessed, and everyone swears the pig was not where the Reeve says it was. No one can quite agree whether manor courts preserve order or simply give arguments better handwriting. A servant girl brings ale in a jug and a wooden bowl of hot beans for those working late. She has a red string tied around her wrist. You notice it as she hands you the bowl. She says her grandmother tied it there to keep aches from settling in her bones during frost. Some swear red thread draws pain away from the joints. Others say warmth, rest, and not carrying water at dawn would do more good. But such luxuries are less easily knotted. You eat standing beside a barrel of apples. The beans are soft, salty, and deeply welcome. The dog sits just inside the door, watching the storehouse mice with theatrical restraint. A candle burns on the clerk's table, its flame steady enough for writing, though each draught from the door makes it lean. The clerk trims the wick with a small snuffer and guards the flame with his hand before returning to the ledger. Outside, the bells mark the hour. Inside, winter is being measured. So many bundles, so many sacks, so many candles for night still to come. You feel the season pressing against the wall's long darkness, frozen roads, damp cloaks, hungry animals, people counting what they have and pretending not to count what they fear. In summer, light lingers late, but winter asks payment for every hour after dusk. The reeve buys nearly all the candles Martin offers and promises more tallow after the next slaughtering. Promises, you have learned, are a common currency and sometimes burn less cleanly than fat. Martin accepts, but only after the clerk marks it in the ledger. Ink, like wax, gives shape to trust. Before you leave, the reeve unlocks a chest to show Martin the manor's better candle stock. Inside lie thick beeswax candles reserved for feast days, Christmas prayers, visits from noble kin, and perhaps the illness of someone important enough to need light that smells of honey. They are wrapped in linen and laid beside a small packet of incense and 2 silvered candlesticks. The reeve touches them with visible anxiety. Mouse got one last year, he says. Martin looks genuinely wounded. Mice respect nothing, the clerk adds. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether mice nibble candles for hunger, mischief, or because tallow is the only part of human civilization they understand. Martin advises hanging the better wax from a beam in a sealed box, with mint and perhaps a cat who takes professional pride in the matter. The dog looks away, as if cats are beneath discussion. Night has thickened when you step back outside. The storehouse door closes behind you with a heavy oak groan, and the reeve sets the iron key at his belt. The market square is nearly empty, its stalls bundled and dark. A single lantern burns near the cross. Rain has stopped, but the air is wet enough to shine on stone. At last Martin turns toward home. The workshop waits with its low roof and carved candle sign. Inside, the room is colder than you hoped, but familiar enough to feel kind. You set down the empty basket. Martin places the onions from the carter beside the hearth, the dried apples on the shelf, and the promise of future tallow in the invisible place where craftsmen store uncertain blessings. Your hands ache from road and carrying. Your cloak smells of frost, shrine smoke, storehouse grain, and wet wool. The blue thread charm remains in your pouch. The dog collapses near the ashes as if he has personally attended court, repaired wheels, guarded saints, and supervised all winter provisions. Martin lights one small candle from the night's work and sets it on the table. Its flame opens gently, pushing back the workshop dark. You watch it shine on the bone-handled knife, the wick bundles, the chapel stubs, the cracked egg bowl, the wrapped wax, and Martin's tired face. Winter eats candles, he says. You nod, because after the storehouse you understand. Winter eats daylight first, then patience, then fuel. then every small comfort a household owns. Candles are not decoration here. They are counted, guarded, traded, promised, and prayed over. They help courts continue, feasts glitter, servants work, monks read, mothers watch, and poor travellers find the door. Outside, the town settles deeper into night. Inside, one candle burns cleanly on the table, and for a little while, winter waits beyond the shutters. The candle on Martin's table burns lower while the night gathers against the shutters, but the day has not quite released you. It never does, not cleanly. In this town, work has a way of hiding in corners until you sit down, then stepping forward with a polite cough and another basket. Martin counts the remaining stock by the candle's wavering light. A few tallow candles for kitchens, 3 rushlight bundles, 2 crooked tapers marked for ordinary use, which you now understand means anyone with poor eyesight or low standards. The better shelves are nearly bare after the castle, the shrines, the market, and the manor storehouse. Then comes the knock. Not loud, just 3 careful taps on the door, the sound of someone hoping not to wake the whole lane, yet very much hoping to wake Martin. He opens it to find the gate guard standing outside in his fur-lined cloak, rain shining on his beard though the sky had seemed clear only moments before. Weather, like taxes, has returned without asking. The guard holds a horn lantern in one hand and a broken candle stub in the other. "Need 2 for the postern," he says. "Fog coming in." Martin looks at the stub. "This was one of mine. Then it died honourably. It was cut in half." The guard shrugs. Economy. No one can quite agree whether guards are underpaid, overcautious, or simply fond of making every candle last until it becomes a moral lesson. Martin gives him 2 sturdy tallow candles, taking in return a small iron hook from the gatehouse, bent but usable, and a promise that you will not be charged extra if you pass late by the postern tomorrow. Promises again. The town is full of them, stacked like damp firewood. The door closes. You think the matter done. Another knock comes before Martin can bar it. This time it is the servant girl from the manor storehouse, breathless beneath her hood, red thread still tied around her wrist. She carries a small bundle wrapped in cloth, 3 candle stubs from the Reeves table, a cracked wooden holder, and a handful of dried mint from the storehouse loft. Mistress says Master Martin might mend or trade, she says. Martin accepts the bundle, turns the wooden holder in his hands, and says the crack can be bound with wire. The girl's eyes move to the candle on the table, then to the hanging charms by the hearth. She asks, shyly, whether a blessed candle truly eases a troubled sleep. Martin does not laugh. Sometimes, he says, sometimes a warm blanket does more. The girl nods as if this is wisdom both holy and affordable. Some swear that a candle burned beside the bed on certain saints' nights can keep nightmares from crouching at the footboard. Others say nightmares come from heavy supper, damp straw, and old worries. Even now, it is hard to tell whether the flame drives shadows away or simply gives the frightened eye somewhere gentle to rest. When she leaves, Martin sends a small rushlight with her, unpaid. He says nothing about it, neither do you. Then the rain thickens. You hear it first on the roof, then in the lane, then against the shutters. Martin sighs and takes up his cloak. Last errands. Of course. You follow him into the wet dark, carrying a covered basket. The town has narrowed into lamps, puddles, and walls. Your wool cloak drinks rain until it hangs heavy from your shoulders. The blue thread thorn charm in your pouch has become damp and prickly, but you keep it anyway. The dog comes too. though with an expression suggesting he has filed several objections. The first stop is Widow Agnes. Her house is small but warm, with rushes on the floor and a spinning wheel near the hearth. She takes the rushlights you made, tests their peel, and declares them acceptable in the tone of a queen granting mercy. In exchange, she gives Martin a twist of linen thread, a cracked pilgrim badge she found near the market cross, and a little packet of dried sage. For smoke and sorrow, she says. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether sage cleanses a room of grief, sickness, ill luck, or merely yesterday's cabbage. But Widow Agnes believes in it with such calm authority that you suspect the room itself behaves better out of respect. Next you pass the alehouse, where the door opens briefly and spills warmth, voices, and the smell of ale into the rain. The alewife stands in the doorway with her sleeves rolled, holding a bowl of saved candle ends from the hearth. These smoked, she says, because you let the wick grow like a hedge. Martin replies. She gives him the bowl anyway, and he gives her one cleaner candle at a reduced price, because she feeds half the market when coin runs thin. A trade, a scold, a favour. This is how the town keeps breathing. At the church porch, a parish clerk waits under the stone arch, protecting a little book beneath his cloak. He is the same thin man from the Abbey guest house, or perhaps all clerks begin to look similar once ink and cold have worked on them long enough. He needs 2 small candles for the sacristy, one for the priest's reading, and one for a woman keeping vigil near a sick husband. Martin gives him the candles. The clerk pays with coins so cold they sting your palm when you receive them. Inside the church, beyond the half-open door, a single lamp glows before the altar. The air smells of stone, old incense, damp wood, and beeswax. The flame is very still. You stand there only a moment, but it follows you back into the rain. By the time you return to the workshop, your hands are numb, your hem is soaked, and your boots make a soft, defeated sound with every step. The basket is heavier than when you left, though not with any one useful thing. Candle ends, mint, sage, a bent iron hook, a cracked holder, a damaged pilgrim badge, cold coins, promises, a rumour from Widow Agnes that the white hare has been seen again near the gallows road, a warning from the clerk that the abbey wants more altar tapers before Candlemas, a smell of alehouse smoke woven into your cloak. The workshop receives it all. Martin lays each object on the table. Nothing is dismissed. The bent hook may hang a lantern, the cracked holder may be mended, the candle ends will melt, the mint will guard stores from mice, perhaps, the sage will sweeten smoke, perhaps. The pilgrim badge, dented and dull, shows a saint whose face has nearly worn away. Martin turns it over with his thumb. Keep it, he says, for luck, for remembering where luck is sold. You tuck it beside the blue thread charm, and the 2 small objects rest together in your pouch thorn and saint, road and market. Belief and trade. The last work before sleep is quiet. You spread your cloak near the hearth to dry. Steam rises from the wool in a smell so strong it seems almost alive. Martin binds the cracked candle holder with a bit of wire. You sort stubs by colour and smell. Beeswax to one side, smoky tallow to another. The dog presses close to the fire, pretending he has always loved staying indoors. Outside. The fog arrives. You see it through the shutter crack, pale in the lane, softening the opposite wall until the town seems made of breath and memory. Somewhere near the postern, the guard will be setting one of Martin's candles in a lantern. Somewhere in the church, a woman sits beside a sick-bed flame. Somewhere in the manor, the storehouse candles wait among grain and apples. The world is dark, but not unlit. Martin banks the hearth at last. The table holds its strange little harvest from the day, each object touched by someone's need. Your hands ache, but more gently now, your eyes lower. The candle between you burns with a small, steady flame, gathering the workshop close. Tomorrow, the final candle will be made from all these leavings. Tonight, you sit in wet wool and warm smoke, listening to rain fade into fog, feeling the town settle around you like a heavy blanket. The fog remains when morning comes, pressed close to the shutters, softening the lane until even the cooper's shed across the way seems to belong to a dream someone forgot to finish. The workshop wakes slowly, not with the sharp, cold bustle of market day, not with the guarded care of abbey wax, not with the aching repetition of night dipping, but with a quieter feeling, as if everything gathered on Martin's table has been waiting for this final small work. There are the candle ends from the alehouse, smoky and dark near the wick. There are chapel stubs from the abbey, pale and faintly sweet with incense. There is little wax scraped from the roadside shrine, grey with dust but still usable. There are shavings from the castle tapers, a few tallow scraps from kitchen candles, and the broken rushlight ends Widow Agnes sent back tied with thread. Beside them lie the bent iron hook, the repaired wooden holder, the dried sage, the mint, the cracked pilgrim badge, and your blue thread thorn charm resting in your pouch like a tiny private question. Martin does not hurry. He sets a small pot over the hearth and begins sorting by smell, colour, and trustworthiness. Beeswax first, then cleaner tallow, then the smoky remnants set aside for rougher use. You help scrape dirt from old wax with a bone-handled knife. The curls fall into a bowl. Each shaving seems too small to matter, yet the bowl fills. No one can quite agree whether old candle wax remembers the prayers, gossip, fear, and laughter it once lit. Martin says wax remembers heat and wick, which is answer enough for craft. Still, as the scraps soften together, you think of the places they came from: the alehouse bench, the abbey guest house, the market stall, the shrine by the ford, the castle hall, the manor storehouse, the church porch in rain. The pot melts them into one quiet pool. The smell is strange but gentle. A little honey, a little smoke, a trace of rosemary, sage, and old tallow, not noble, not poor, simply gathered. Martin chooses one straight linen wick, one you twisted yourself after several unfortunate attempts. He holds it up, studies the evenness, and gives a small nod. This final candle will not be for sale, he says. It will burn in the workshop tonight, to mark the turning of one long labour into rest. You dip it slowly, down into the melted wax, up into the cool morning air, drip, wait. Again. The motion is familiar now, but softer. Outside, the town is muffled by fog. Bells sound at a distance, blurred and low, as if rung beneath wool. A cart passes unseen. Someone laughs once and fades away. The dog sleeps under the table with his nose on his paws, finally convinced that no road, shrine, castle, or market requires his immediate supervision. Layer by layer, the candle grows. You think of how small brightness is in this world. It must be begged from bees, scraped from fat, twisted through linen, guarded from mice, bought with eggs, counted in ledgers, carried through rain, blessed by priests, trimmed by alewives, watched by mothers, judged by stewards, and prayed beside by pilgrims. It is never casual, It is never endless. It costs something every time it burns. And perhaps that is why everyone gathers around it so naturally. By afternoon, the fog thins. A pale winter light touches the workshop sign outside, catching the old flecks of gilding on the carved flame. Martin trims the bottom of the finished candle and rolls it once beneath his palm. It is not perfectly smooth. No handmade thing is, if it has lived honestly, but it stands straight in the repaired wooden holder, the crack bound neatly with wire. Even now it is hard to tell whether this candle belongs more to craft, memory, or superstition. Martin sprinkles a pinch of dried sage near the hearth, hangs the bent iron hook by the door for a lantern, and places the cracked pilgrim badge on the shelf above the wax pot. The saint's worn face looks out over the workshop with no clear expression, which is probably wise. Evening comes gently, not as rain, not as duty, not as a castle order sealed in wax, but as a slow dimming along the rafters. Martin closes the shutters. You bring in wood. The dog shifts closer to the hearth. Outside, the town folds itself inward, oak doors barred, rushes stirred, pottage bowls scraped, damp cloaks hung, bells fading one after another into the low sky. Martin lights the final candle. The flame catches at the wick you made. For a breath, it is small and uncertain. Then it steadies. A warm light opens on the table, touching the knife, the bowls, the bundled wicks, the wrapped beeswax, Martin's tired hands, your damp boots, and the soot-black rafters above. It smells faintly of every place you have been: honey from the abbey, smoke from the alehouse, cold stone from the church, road dust from the shrine, tallow from the yard before dawn, sage from Widow Agnes, a little of the castle's golden pride, a little of the manor's anxious winter counting. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether a candle can hold a journey. But here, in the dim workshop with the fog outside and the bell sounding far away, it seems possible enough. You sit on the stool beside the hearth. Martin takes the other. Neither of you speaks for a while. There is no need. The candle speaks in its own small language, a soft flutter, a steady glow, a tiny pool of melting wax forming at the base. The dog sighs. The rafters darken above you. The town grows quiet around the workshop, and all the roads of the last days seem to curl inward toward this one flame. Your hands are tired but warm. Your cloak is dry enough. Your boots are still questionable, because some medieval problems are beyond mortal craft. Yet you are here, safe behind the oak door, with stone walls holding the night outside and candlelight breathing softly within. The flame lowers by slow degrees, and the world lowers with it. The workshop becomes still. The tools rest. The wick bundles wait. The wax pot cools. The old charms hang without stirring. Outside, the fog presses against the town in a pale hush, softening the market cross, the gatehouse, the abbey road, the fields, the shrine, the castle hill, all the places where small lights have been left behind. You do not need to follow them now. You simply sit. The candle burns lower, and its light becomes rounder, warmer, more tender. It gathers the last gold from the table and lays it over Martin's hands, over the sleeping dog, over the rough wool blanket waiting near your pallet. The long day loosens. The old roads loosen. The market voices, the bells, the rain, the creak of cartwheels, the monk's chant, the alehouse laughter, the steward's careful inspection. All of it drifts farther away. You breathe in smoke, wax, wool, and cooling ash. You are allowed to be tired. You're allowed to set down the basket, the road, the wet cloak, the worry of weather and tolls and winter stores. The candle has done what it can. It has made a little room inside the dark, and for tonight, that is enough. The flame bends once, then rises again. Martin banks the hearth. The dog dreams softly. Somewhere far off, a bell marks the hour, but it is no longer asking anything of you. The sound fades into the rafters, into the straw, into the warm hush of the room. The candle burns low. The night grows gentle, and you rest. The last glow settles into the workshop like a hand laid softly over a sleeping house. There's nothing left to hurry toward, no gate to reach before closing, no steward to please, no market token to show, no muddy road asking for another step. The walls hold their warmth. The wool blanket waits. The faint scent of beeswax lingers in the air, sweet and mild, mixed with ash and old wood and the quiet breath of the dog at your feet. Outside, the medieval town lies under fog and darkness, but it feels far away now, softened into shapes rather than duties. You listen to the tiny sounds that remain, a coal settling, a drop of water falling from the eaves, the small, patient whisper of the candle as it reaches the end of its wick. Even the bells seem gentler now, as if they too are being covered with a blanket, one note at a time. Your eyes grow heavy, the rafters blur, the table, the knife, the wax pot, the charms by the hearth, the cracked pilgrim badge on the shelf, all fade into warm shadow. You have walked the roads, crossed the market, stood in Abbey Stone, watched castle light, shared bread beside a broken cart, and come back again to this dim, safe room. Now the candle's last light softens into ember dark. There is only warmth, only quiet, only the slow breath of night folding around you. Sleep can come gently now, like fog over fields, like ash over coals, like a final golden thread drawn softly through the dark.